The on-again, off-again relationship between the U.S. and Iran, well, it is like a Hallmark movie with bigger consequences.
That's right. And not the Hallmark movie that we probably would want to watch around the holidays. But what you're seeing now is this get-together between the Iranians and the United States that was supposed to be occurring on Friday. Yesterday, the United States was calling off their plan to be meeting in Istanbul with Iran.
We need to back it up. For those who maybe weren't listening earlier in the week, there was conversation between President Trump saying, look, we're going to meet. We're going to actually sit down and do this because Iran had started to really kind of push saying, a regional war is bound to happen if we don't really come up with a deal. America kind of called their bluff a little bit.
And that is with the U.S. having an entire carrier group very close to the Iran region where they could launch an attack from. Iran, as you mentioned, warned this could spark a regional war. And they were supposed to have a sit-down, a face-to-face negotiation between the Iranians and the United States in Istanbul this Friday, tomorrow. Yesterday, the Iranians started to make changes to the plan, saying, no, we are no longer going to meet in Turkey. We want to meet in Oman. We no longer want it to be about the nuclear issue plus human rights plus ballistic missiles plus our support of the proxy groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen. We just want it to be about the nuclear issue. So the United States said, okay, fine, we're not meeting. By the way, we told you, if we don't come to a deal on Friday or at least get somewhere,
you know what's coming.
We're going to bomb you. And then after major pushback from regional allies that probably don't want a war with Iran in their backyard, the U.S. has now agreed that they will move the location from Istanbul to Oman. Now, also think about that, the security involved, the all of the logistics of moving an entire different country where your talks were supposed to be held, Turkey, to a different country, Oman, in just a couple days. That's a headache at least. It's a game from the Iranians. But the U.S. has said they agreed to hold meetings in Oman and that it will be respectful to the allies in the region and in order to continue pursuing the diplomatic track. Now, what we don't know, what the agenda is going to look like. Will the U.S. still insist that the human rights, the protesters, that's what all of this stemmed from, as well as the support for the proxy groups and the ballistic missile program? Are those things going to remain on the agenda tomorrow?
Well, let's hear from NBC News. This was a conversation with President Trump just yesterday.
Should the supreme leader in Iran be worried right now?
I would say he should be very worried, he should be. As you know, they're negotiating with us.
I know they are, but the protesters have said, where are the Americans? You promised them we would have their back. Do we still have their back?
Well, we've had their back, and look, that country's a mess right now because of us. We went in, we wiped out their nuclear.
So that's the question. If we wipe them out,
we have peace in the Middle East. Yeah. If I didn't take out their nuclear, think of it. If we didn't take out that nuclear, we wouldn't have peace in the Middle East because the Arab countries could have never done that. They were very, very afraid of Iran.
Yeah. Interesting, almost antagonistic approach from NBC News a little bit there.
Surprise.
Or just more, maybe gets more conversational. But, pushing President Trump on these issues, saying where the people are saying, where's the United States? I do think there's a discussion point to be had of how far you take this. And I think a lot of Americans, and we'll ask Rick Grinnell about this later on, because Rick has been one of those original voices within the Trump administration, a guy who worked, by the way, for the Bush administration during the war on terror, saw the good and the bad that came from that, and very much was in favor of the way President Trump kind of pitched the no new wars and that feedback. So when you have a moment like this where President Trump, and I quote, says he should be very worried, that does throw a little bit of a different plan for people who aren't expecting. Now, again, doesn't necessarily mean there'll be the boots on the ground kind of war affair happening.
Well, and here's what I want to hear from the audience about, because if the president and the negotiators go to Oman and it is only about the nuclear issue, all of this stemmed from the protests on the ground that we saw. That is why Iran, as the president said, if you start killing your civilians, then we will get involved. That's where all these getting back to the negotiating table stemmed from. And remember, the president and his team were negotiating with the Iranians in the summer of last year, spring and summer. He gave them a 60-day deadline to actually come to a deal. The Iranians kept moving the goalpost, as they tend to do, to stall. And what did the president do? He bombed their nuclear facilities on June 22nd of 2025. And remember what our press, and when you hear this reporter from NBC saying, should the Supreme Leader be worried right now? On June 21st, The Atlantic wrote a piece by David Frum that was titled, "What Iran Knows About Trump." And the subtitle was, "The mullahs of Iran joined the bet that Trump always chickens out." The next day, their nuclear sites were decimated by those B-52 bombers that went in Operation Midnight Hammer. So I feel like the Ayatollah and the mullahs in Iran are coming to this negotiation with a different context. That being said, they're still playing games, moving the site 2 days before, saying things are off limits with negotiation. I feel like they should be a little bit more apprehensive based off their last round of talks. But here's the question I have for our audience.
Okay.
If the president agrees to only a nuclear issue negotiation, and they come out of this agreeing to get rid of their entire nuclear program, we, one, know the Iranians are patient because they will wait as long as they can to build up that arsenal, and with their end goal, destroying Israel, destroying the United States, if they can attempt that. Are you fine with sidelining the issue of the human rights for a more America first policy of like, yeah, they don't have nuclear power, they can deal with themselves?
It's less of a stress
or
on you.
Is it concerning that what got us here again is something that we have been calling for a long time, the liberation of the Iranian people? We've been upset with what Obama's deal did in propping up the regime longer. It was a terrible deal. But would you trade a non-nuclear Iran for at least a long time, where they have to hit complete reset buttons, start at zero if they are wanting to build up a nuclear program? Would you trade that for leaving them in power for longer? Or would you like to see a more aggressive campaign that ends up ousting the mullahs in that theocratic death cult?
Yeah, and people ask about this. How do you monitor a foreign country like this when you say end your nuclear program? We do send people checks and balances to do routine check-ins. There's people who will be stationed there. There are ways to be a little bit more vigilant. However, I don't trust that behind the scenes, there's not a way they're working on these things. It's not happening. So personally, do I want to see us get involved in another war? Absolutely not. But do I think we should, help the current situation there to maybe lead to what could be a good day for Iran when it has been so long? Again, a country that has been written off when just a few decades ago was a thriving, multicultural Western-ish society. Maybe not Western, but closer to a Western society than a lot of what's happening, maybe closer to a Saudi Arabia, to what's happening over there now. Yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to see the Persian people and the Iranian people be able to live in peace and actually thrive. Brilliant people who have contributed so much to our society in America that if they have a moment where this can happen, and I feel like this now gets on repeat, where they get close, and then, as Will said, but in a different way, the reset button is hit, and you still have this dictatorship in control. And instead of seeing actual potential freedom being brought to these people. There are shades of the war on terror. You've been a part of that for so long. You have seen what it was like to be within that administration during the George W. Bush years, of course, now during the Trump years. We have people calling in. They feel both ways. Some people feel like, hey, we need to get involved militarily. We need to be supporting the people of Iran. That's where we need to go. We have other people calling in saying, look, the President Trump I voted for was more of the America First side, which was the let's get a deal done with Iran. We know that there are these meetings that keep going back and forth for Friday. How do you feel American people should be feeling right now?
Well, first of all, let me just say the obvious, which is I am an America First person. I am a diplomat. I don't want war. I feel like the diplomats are always the ones that are trying to find the solution, and we need to have diplomacy with muscle. Diplomacy isn't easy. If you want to avoid war, you better have diplomats who are very tough. With that being said, we also have to remember that the goal of foreign policy is to keep the American people prosperous, strong, and safe. And so there are times where we have to make calculations to keep America safe You may have to do strategic strikes. I get that. President Trump has been very good about figuring out how to do strategic strikes in Iran, taking out Soleimani. I think the evaluation of the government should be about that. Are we in danger? And if we are in danger, we need to act sooner rather than later, and it needs to be precision driven. I know that's what President Trump views, his criteria and how he looks at the world. Iran has been a problem for a very long time. Remember, Joe Biden and Barack Obama gave the Iranian regime billions of dollars. And that terrorism is funded, the terrorism in the region, from Hezbollah, from Hamas, from the Hezbollah in Lebanon. That terrorism is funded by Iran. And so we need to be very strategic about freezing that money, making sure that terrorism stops, and keeping Americans safe. We know that Iran has a motive to go after America, Americans, President Trump, any American that they can get their hands on. And so this is a dangerous regime with lots of money, and they are going to be a constant problem unless we figure out a way to deal with it.